All right, guys. So, grand rounds today. Want to talk to you guys about a thing that you guys will know will happen. Obviously, students are going to come in. If they want private tutoring, they usually want it because they want to do well on their homework, quizzes, and tests. We got that. What I will try to do when I'm having the consultations early on is say, okay, what are your goals? And make sure that we lay out their goals very clear so that you can refer back to their goals as, okay, you want to have a good, last quarter or a good third trimester or a good, end of the year, right? Here. In order to do that, we got to do this kind of like mapped out timing sort of a thing. So we can't just focus on short-term goals. We can't just study for tomorrow's quiz, even though that'll be useful. You might have to sacrifice this quiz grade in order to really reinforce your foundation fundamentals and make sure that you can, all that stuff, right? As part of that, so you guys know that, yeah? But sometimes it's hard to communicate, and if you tell the student, that doesn't necessarily mean the student's going to buy into it. It doesn't necessarily mean that the parent is going to buy into it. And they might still keep coming back and saying, yeah, but I really want to work on this question for this practice, like to practice for this quiz. Or I really want to practice, like, this thing for this test or whatever. I really just want to finish my homework today. So if something like that's happening, very, very fast response, get in touch with me. Let me know right away. I will try to set up a meeting with the parent and student, obviously, to get that handled. You can, during a private tutoring session, explain the system, right? The system is, if you want to do well on tomorrow's quiz, cool, we can probably make that happen. But it will happen at the detriment of the final at the end of the semester. Is that what you want? Because the final is worth more than the quiz. And having those types of conversations. But if you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself, you can defer it to Arvin or I. One of the other things that we can do, if it needs to happen very fast, let me know. And I can just pop into whatever tutoring session you're about to do, essentially, and just say, hey, Chelsea here, just want to talk to you about this one thing, something like that. So that's been one of the things that came up as a question recently. And Arvin, do you want to talk any more about that stuff?
Yeah. So that, it's important to make sure that the students are seeing that same perspective that we are, which is, this is a thing that people do a lot. It's really popular. It's a good chance that your parents did the same thing and it was to their own academic detriment. And there's a good chance that, given that they can afford our services, that they probably stopped doing it at some future point, which is how they got there. But we want to say that, like, we want to make sure that they understand this is a thing that a lot of people do, and then describe what the thing is. Because here's the thing, nobody in the whole world wants to be ignored. And if you say the thing you're doing right now is silly, but you haven't made it clear to them that you know what the thing is that's silly, they're going to feel dismissed. So when I'm working with this, I know obviously I'm rushing around stuff, but I spend actually a decent amount of time discussing what they're doing. And I say, like, is basically what you're thinking this? And if they say it's not exactly that, I make sure that they know that I know why they're doing what they're doing. Because there's more than one reason. It could be that they just don't think they're ever going to do well in this, right? Maybe it doesn't matter that they do well in this. It could mean that they just have some other stuff that's in the way. So I want to make sure that I get exactly where they're coming from. There should be no guesswork in this. You shouldn't say this. You shouldn't be thinking to yourself, this student is trying to do this memorize and forget, memorize, suffer through the test, forget cycle, because they're just being difficult. You should know exactly what's on their mind, and most importantly, they should know that you know exactly what's on their mind. So that's the first thing. Once they know that you know it because you said it back to them and they exactly know that you know it, then that's where I want to have that discussion where I say, well, here's what's going to happen in that direction. Here's why people do it. Here's what you said you're doing, and I totally get that. But if you do that, you're going to have, just like what Chelsea was saying, you're going to have this gain and this loss. And I know, and for a lot of people, here's the thing, a lot of people have written off that loss because they've been doing this for a while. They've never done well on a math exam ever. So they are assuming that they're going to do poorly in the math exam anyway. So I'll ask them, like, are you assuming that you're going to do bad on the math exam no matter what? And they'll say, yeah. I say, oh, well, if you believe, if you could do well on the math exam, because nobody's going to trade an impossibility for a possibility for an impossibility. They know they can do well on the quiz. If they believe they cannot do well on the exam, then of course they'll sacrifice the thing that's glossed anyway. People sacrifice junk all the time. But you need to make sure that if they understand that you, with your system, with your expertise, with all that stuff, can make a high exam score a real possibility. Would they trade it for that? That's the key thing. And so that's a lot of times where my emphasis is on some of those types of discussions.
Yeah, awesome. I definitely feel like you just turned into me for a minute there. That was weird.
That is weird.
It's kind of some of the other things, just keep in mind that students are going to have kind of psychological meltdowns sometimes, although I have recently discovered that I have caused students to have more psychological meltdowns than Arvin has, which makes me feel wildly uncomfortable. But, I did. Usually, right, and all you guys are training for college essays. Usually this comes with college essays. It's going to be the biggest one. So as you're training for it, the biggest thing you have to prepare for is the psychological aspect. Students are always, oh my goodness, even more so than with tests and quizzes, they're always going to want to shortchange every single part of the college essay process forever, thinking that it'll help them get to their end goal faster because they're just panicked about time, panicked about everything. And in that situation, so the experience that I had was that the student was, trying to explain something to me, but it was very, very convoluted, like the student's explanation. And so I just couldn't understand. So I kept trying to repeat something back to her, and she's like, no, it's more like this. And I repeat back to her, and 20 minutes later, I finally was like, oh wait, so do you mean like this? And she broke down crying because she was like, yeah, I feel like we just wasted 20 minutes because you didn't understand what I was saying. And oh my gosh, and it's this whole implosion, right? So definitely, this is why I say it's funny that Arvin mentions this. Mirroring is a really important tool, right? And listening in general all the time. And making sure that you do understand where the student is coming from is useful in group class private tutoring. Doesn't matter. College essays, whatever subject, everything, right? So making sure that you really understand where the student is coming from, checking in, verifying, asking them those types of questions, just to make sure that they know that you know all that stuff. And in college essays, equally important, just keeping in mind that they might break down and cry. In those moments, obviously, just, be the one who's not crying. Don't panic, because if their emotions are here, you have to stay really, really steady, right? You've got to even that out. And then, just come to me and talk to us anytime, a student seems to be panicking. Come get ahead of the game. Make sure that we handle that early on. And usually stuff like that can be handled with 1 9-minute conversation or something, So it's totally doable.
I just want to jump in on that real quick. So, and this is something that I definitely had a few issues with this summer, which is when you're trying to get where a student's coming from, it's really important that you don't also let them do something that's going to lead to a problem later on, especially with younger students. So if a student, this multiplies importance in college essay, if a student is trying to do something that for certain is not going to work, right? It's something that cannot possibly work. Then there needs to be intercession essentially immediately. What does that look like? If it's something where you can just explain it's not going to work, you can. If not, you have to just let me or Chelsea know, and we have to talk to that student that day about whatever it is. We need to make sure that's getting in there, because if a student is in this high-strung college essay state and is super time sensitive and everything sensitive and is freaking out and all that kind of stuff, and then you also let them go down a path that is not going to work, here's the thing that you need to avoid with college essays in particular. What you can do is say okay, it's not going to work, but if you want to try it out that way, we can. No. If something cannot work, we're not going to try it out that way. We can discuss it. We can have discussions with Chelsea and me and Chelsea and the parents and every single other person. That's totally fine. But we cannot let a student go down a path that we definitively know cannot work. Teenagers all believe that they're both immortal and any crazy thing that they do is going to work. But we need to be really, really intense about this. So I'm going to give you a couple of of what to expect for college essays. As part of the college essay process, you guys have seen, making sure that the students have developed a real area of expertise. And sometimes they'll say, well, can I just pretend to have the expertise? And that is where you need to be strict and say, you need to actually have the expertise. Now, of course, we put in the interviews and whatnot now to make sure that we're actually checking. But I mean, as we get closer to the time, I imagine that all kinds of things will be going on. It's really, really critical that you never let a student do something that's guaranteed to lead to a psychological implosion later on.
Yeah, like calculators, right? We don't be like, oh yeah, you can try using calculators, but we don't think it works. It's not like that. It's like, no, calculators are bad. Don't do it. Throw it in the trash can. Get rid of it. Don't keep it in your life at all. So, that level of reaction. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Just touching on a few of those ideas. And Arvin, if you want to add anything, that's cool. Otherwise, we can wrap up. Terrence, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I just have a follow-up question. So you guys were talking about how when students are reacting, right? When students are reacting, what to do, and how do you, what do you do when students are reacting badly, and what do you do so that they don't do that in the first place, right? But what if students are not reacting at all? They're just like, okay, 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 and then but then deep inside, they're like going through something, and they just hate you, and they're just not expressing it. So like, what do you do in that case?
Arvin, are you gonna go first, or should I? We're gonna have two very different approaches to this, all right? My approach to this, and this is all I can really speak from, is usually just to try to get the kids to laugh, right? Laughter is my general thing, right? You can't have a meeting with a parent where you say, hey, I think that your child is basically catatonic, and I just wanted to talk to you about if we could try to inject some emotions into him or her. Because that is impossible. We're not going to do that, right? So I try to get them laughing. A lot of people, you get that stereotype of like the kid who is just very monotone, disinterested. Maybe you can start to like you assign labels like depression and things like that. But regardless, it doesn't matter. They're just sort of like spaced out or not there or definitely not emotional. That's okay. Right? I mean, it is okay. It is fine. You don't have to have as much emotions as I do in order to learn. It is not a necessary requirement. So, as part of that, I try to get kids to laugh as much as I can. Usually I can get those kids to chuckle a little bit, and I consider that a huge win. And then from there, it's just like, if you have enough rapport, they'll probably trust you anyway. And maybe like 3 or 4 years later, they'll open up, or something, or not. So, that's kind of what I go for. Arvin, what do you say?
I think you need to get to the heart of why, why do people act in this like sort of monotone catatonic way? And when you look through the world, you see that this is common behavior among two very specific groups of people: teenagers and people in prison. They speak in a very sort of like deadened type way, even though the age is different. I mean, the people in prison might be like 30, 40, 50 years old, but they still talk like that. And so what's happening over there? These are people that are feeling, one, entirely powerless with good reason, right? And two, they're people who feel that anything they say is going to be judged harshly, and even worse, anything they think is going to be judged harshly. So the way of masking your thoughts is to reveal no emotion of any kind. There's two ways to do it. One is the way that I do it, by using using like active vocal variety and whatnot to distract people from the fact that I'm hiding everything. And the other way to do is what teenagers do, which is they use no information at all, so they speak in a monotone. So in order to draw somebody out of that, what do they need to know? They need to know that they can say things to you which you don't have to agree with, but that you're not going to just jump down their throat on, right? In other words, you can accept what they're saying without agreeing what they're saying. So for example, if somebody has different, like there's a lot of times parents get into this thing where they believe that if their kid has like a single thought that is misaligned with one of their core beliefs, then everything is gone to trash and that everything's really problematic. So if you let the kid know that, yes, you can think one thing and I can think a different thing, and we can coexist in that way, and that's totally fine. I'll do my best to understand you. If it's about calculators, I'll hear you out, but we're still not going to use calculators. But anything else, I'll try my best to understand where you're coming from. Once they start to know that they can say things without being attacked for it, then they're going to be a little bit more willing to open up. Now, our job, of course, is tricky. Our job is to critique things, right? We are there to find issues. So that's where you need to emphasize this idea that we're looking for areas of improvement that everyone has, that I have, that Chelsea has, that they have, all the tutors have. It's not that there's something wrong with you. It's we're trying to build up a thing. And in order to build up a thing, we need to find areas in which to build up those things. So it's really, really key that they can speak, open up, share what's on their mind without thinking they're going to be just kind of smacked for it.
Yeah, that's a really good addition. One of the things that I do, and I've joked to you guys about this before, but I try to be like extra ridiculous, right? So I do all that stuff where I'm always talking about like fam and dude and like sup and bro and like I just say these like ridiculous kid words, right? And anytime there's a new kid word, I am so on top of learning it, like my favorite activity. But, everything from just, the very weird, I'm, like, constantly, I don't know, one of my shticks is to just, like, make weird body positions. I'm always like, what? Oh my gosh, are you serious? Like, kind of like doing weird stuff. But if they know that I am, like, weird enough that I'm outside of the norm, like, I'm not the person, like, standing there being like, are you doing your work correctly? I don't know. Let me inspect it. Like, I'm not, like, so stiff and firm. When they get that feeling, that also helps. And, Arvin, you just reminded me of that, too. So that's another addition that I have. Anyway, anything else?
I think that pretty much covers it.
Terrence, any other questions? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that answered my question. Yeah.
Okay, all right, awesome. All right, cool, guys. Thanks for listening in, and we'll see you next week.